This is Stereoactive Presents. I'm your host, Jeremiah Lee McVeigh, and this is the first installment of something I'm calling Useless Useful, which I'll tell you about in just a moment. All right, so what is useless useful? Let me kind of break it out for you, just so it makes a little sense. It's pretty simple, though. First off, useless, that comes from something I used to do called Fort Useless. A lot of people who are listening to this probably already know about that, of course. But yeah, that was a independent DIY arts and music venue that I ran in Brooklyn for 5 years. And it kind of grew a community around it. A lot of people who gravitated towards it and took part in what was going on there. And so it became, like I said, a little community, which I always appreciated being a part of and was very valuable to me in my life. So that's what useless comes from. Useful, we kind of veered off from useless. So in 2016, after Donald Trump was elected, myself and a lot of people I knew, especially from the Fort Useless community, felt very disillusioned and dejected and were looking for ways to kind of put themselves into causes and projects and good works, I guess. And so I created this Facebook group called, at the time, Useless Action Initiative, which was sort of a place for people from that community to kind of share ideas about what they were doing, of marches that were going on or causes that needed support, and numbers for Senate offices and Congress people that you could call to let them know how you felt about something that was happening. So as a lot of these things do, it kind of was very strong and active for a while, and then kind of people peeled off and did their own things, but it was a good little thing while it lasted, and I personally found it helpful. I hope other people did as well. Eventually, someone was like, why are we calling this Useless Action Initiative? That seems to kind of devalue what we're trying to do. So we changed it to Useful, very simple change. And I don't know, that dichotomy just always kind of stuck with me, of useless being this not actually useless thing, but meaning fun community kind of stuff, things that you were into, I guess, and useful being, pretty straightforward, just like things that you are interested in that you think are useful to the world. So useless is more ironic, useful is more descriptive, I guess. And so it's always just kind of been in the back of my head, that dichotomy, and maybe using it on this podcast as sort of like a bulletin board, so to speak, for things that are going on, things that are worth paying attention to, and kind of breaking it up into that useless bucket and that useful bucket. Useless being sort of like pop culture things and just things that you're kind of like thinking about or into at the moment. And again, they're not actually useless. It's ironic, fun, hopefully. It's just stuff that you're interested in. And then useful, I want to share some things that are going on in the world and how you can be a part of them if you are so inclined, that kind of thing. And eventually I would like to be kind of bringing other people into this. There's some plans for that, hopefully. But yeah, I want this to also be a place for people from that Fort Useless community, other communities I've been a part of, and kind of like grow this Stereoactive Media community that I've been trying to grow now for a few years. And so we'll also take a break right now, and I'll use this bulletin board, so to speak, to tell you about some of those stereoactive things, and we'll get into the useless, useful segment. So I want to tell you about two projects from Stereoactive Media that I've been working on lately. The first is called RedactedAV, and as a lot of people listening to this also know, they might not only know about Fort Useless, but they probably also know that I used to work at a company for 10 years that made a lot of podcasts and videos, and we did these sessions twice a week with artists in a full studio, serious business studio run by Travis Harrison most of the time. And when that company closed a few years ago, all that stuff went offline. And I've been starting to make some efforts to get some of that stuff back online. So the first set of videos from that old company just went online a couple weeks ago. And we led off with stuff by the band Landlady, led by Adam Schatz. And the reason I wanted to lead off with their session was because it was just one of my favorites that we ever did there out of like 1,000 sessions or more that we did. And it was special to me because Adam was always a good showman. He came through our studio for a few different projects he worked on. And Landlady was the one that he really led as a front man like that. And they're just a really great band, first of all. But like I said, Adam is a showman, and he did something in that session that was really special, and I always really appreciated. He sort of, during their last song, took the cameras from the people shooting it in the studio with them and kind of turned them around and like got those people involved and brought Travis in from the control room and got everybody singing along to the last song. And it was just a very special moment. So I was really happy that he allowed me to put those songs, those performances back out into the world. And you can find those on our YouTube channel, which I'll link to here. But RedactedAV, more broadly, is going to be this organized attempt by Stereoactive Media to reintroduce a lot of that stuff from that old company back online, since it's been offline now for a few years. So check out redactedav.com if you want to find that session and a lot more. Like I said, I'll link to it here too. The other thing I want to tell you about is When We See Each Other. So this is a podcast that I produced and edited at that old company that I just was talking about. And it was hosted by Nikisha McLeod. It was a show that featured interviews and music mainly by artists who were Black, BIPOC, LGBTQIA+. So we got a lot of really interesting personal stories, and I was always proud to be a part of that show, and always humbled and honored that Nikki let me be a part of that and that the artists would trust us with their stories. And I always thought it was a real shame that that stuff went offline when that old company closed. So Nikki and I have been working in recent months to get permission from some of those artists to put their interviews back online. So we have 6 of those out now. I'll try to list them off the top of my head. They're with artists like Njimile, Nyala, Billy Dean Thomas, Mackenzie Shivers, Mel Fine, and An Only Child. And like I said, those interviews just, I thought, were very impactful, and they really shared some personal stuff about their identities as sometimes trans or queer artists or Black artists. And I just thought it was a lot of useful conversation, and I'm glad that it's back out there in the world. And Nikki and I have already recorded a first new episode that should be out pretty soon, so watch out for that. And please subscribe to that show just about anywhere you can find podcasts. If you can't find it, get in touch, and we will try to get it wherever you listen to stuff so it's convenient for you. Okay, so now we get to the useless segment of the episode. And again, useless is ironic and fun here. This stuff is not useless. It's the opposite of useless, but it's just stuff that I am into or thinking about at the moment. The first is pretty broad. It's the band R.E.M. So if you're around my age, you may have grown up listening to R.E.M. even without realizing how much you were listening to them. They were a band that was always there. They were always on the radio when I was growing up. They were always on MTV and that sort of thing. So I was aware of their music. I liked their music. I think for a long time, I mainly just knew their singles. I ended up getting quite a few R.E.M. albums over the years, but they were never really one of like my core bands that I thought about as like one of my favorites. And in recent years, it's kind of snuck up on me that, wait a second, I have these songs and their music so deeply ingrained in me through osmosis and through consumption. I was listening to them and I liked them, but I just didn't realize how much it meant to me. And I don't know if it's just an age thing or something, like something about it like hits me different now, but I've really been into R.E.M. in a kind of blossoming away over the last couple of years, especially, and have kept going back to it. And lately, kind of surprisingly to me, I've been really into Monster, their album that came out, I think, when I was a freshman in high school, like 1994, give or take. And I remember at the time thinking, oh, this is different for them, because the stuff that they'd had out in the earlier part of the 90s, the stuff that I was really familiar with as I was kind of starting to really get into music and pay attention, was, a little more mellow, softer. I don't know. It wasn't as guitar driven in that way, of like distorted guitars. And it seemed at the time like they were kind of like following the alternative music culture and working that into what they did. Like grunge had just hit, or had maybe at that point was already on the decline, really. And there was so much in the culture about like Kurt Cobain becoming friends with Michael Stipe and that sort of thing. But yeah, I don't know. I got the album, listened to it, and just never really thought about it that much. And then in recent months, I kept wanting to listen to stuff from this album, and Bang and Blame is really like, I don't know, become a song that's a go-to for me lately. And I don't know, maybe other people have this experience, but I'd be curious if anyone has, whether it's R.E.M. or another band like that, someone that was just always kind of there in the background and you appreciated, but you didn't realize how ingrained it was in you until later in life. I'd be curious to hear from people about that. But so R.E.M. is one of my useless topics for this episode. My other topic under the useless umbrella is a movie called The Substance, which maybe you've heard of it. It stars Demi Moore and Margaret Quallet, and in a smaller part, Dennis Quaid as a very disgusting person, I will say. But it's getting a lot of buzz, both good and bad. I think it's a divisive movie. I think it's a movie of extremes. And so you're either probably going to really be into it or really be not into it. I don't know how much of a middle ground there can be for a movie like this. And that's what's kind of exciting about it, is if it connects with you, and it connected with me, there's a lot there to unpack and kind of really think about. And it's a very bold, audacious movie. It's not subtle at all. So, but I would say that despite being bold and brash and unsubtle, there is a lot of nuance underneath the surface if you want to get there. But it's about really the way that we view aging, and especially women who are aging in our culture, and specifically in Hollywood. And Demi Moore, of course, is this sort of icon of 90s femininity in a way. So it's interesting that she's in this role, and I thought she was great. And I thought Margaret Qualley in the other lead role, or the big supporting role, was also amazing. I just thought it had a lot to say. Like I said, you're either going to really like it or not like it, I think. But I think it's worth a watch. The climax of the movie, if you've seen it, you know why I'm laughing. It's outrageous, and visually, tonally, everything. If you're like me, you're just going to be sitting there giddy that someone had the nerve to commit this to film and put it out in theaters and just see what happens. It's one of those kind of endings, I think. And I've saw it now probably about a week and a half ago, and it's just been sticking with me. And I think it's one of the best movies of the year so far. So that's my other useless topic for this episode. And now for the useful segment of the episode, I really want to talk about the hurricane that just came through the Southeast. So I'm located in Tallahassee, Florida these days, and we got lucky in the days leading up to Hurricane Helene making landfall. The predictions became more and more dire for where we are, and there was even discussion of it possibly being the most cataclysmic or catastrophic weather event to hit Tallahassee, maybe in memory. So as it was approaching, me and my family had this like existential dread kind of bubbling up in us, and it's just like stressing us out. But we got lucky. The storm, I guess, veered just enough at the last minute that what we got at our house, at least, was some wind that didn't even bother us as we were sleeping. It hit deep into nightfall, and we were so stressed out that we'd fallen asleep, and it never woke us up. We thought it would. And we never even lost power at our house. Other people in Tallahassee did lose power. There were trees down, I believe, around our neighborhood and some other neighborhoods. So it did cause damage here, but the brunt of the damage in this part of Florida was really along the coast, where storm surges were the big problem, and winds. And so I want to point you towards an article actually written by an in-law of mine, Anna Goni-Lesson, who writes for the USA Today network, and specifically for the Tallahassee Democrat, the paper here where we are. And she went out and spoke to people at a place called Keaton Beach, who, I mean, it's just devastating to hear their stories and to see the photos and videos that she provided in this story. And the thing I want to tell you about from this is, first off, that the lived experience of people isn't always accurately portrayed in the details that everybody else is getting elsewhere. You know, it's just impossible to relay every little fact in detail. What they told Anna, some of these people, was that while the storm surges were expected to be in the 15 to 20 foot range, which is horrendous, they think, based on marks left around the buildings there, that it may have gotten as high as 25 feet in some cases. And while the storm was always listed as a Category 4 at its highest, which is terrible in and of itself, they think that some of the winds that hit them may have actually reached Category 5 status. That doesn't mean that the whole storm ever became a Category 4, but their lived experience in this area, that's what they were dealing with. And the pictures, like I said, show destruction. The stories that Anna got from them were terrifying and really a lot. But I want to point you to that. I'll link to that article in the show notes for this episode. So do please go read that article if you want to get a sense of what was happening on the ground right around here, nearby. And at the end of that article, actually, they list some organizations that you can donate to help people in this area. One that I'll call out is Second Harvest of the Big Bend. There's also United Way of the Big Bend. Big Bend is the area of Florida where the coast really bends along the Gulf Coast there. And then, of course, the Red Cross. So those links are in that article. I'll link to that article. And then, of course, I want to talk about how the storm has affected a nearby region, also in the southeast of the country, specifically Western North Carolina. And of course, they're not the only state or area in this region that has been hit hard. I know Atlanta has gotten some bad stuff and places around there, but North Carolina seems like it's really been hit hard. And that's the place I've seen the most coverage of at this point. And we've heard from people that we know that live around Asheville and Brevard that it's just really bad there. And if you've seen pictures, you know what I'm talking about. But what I want to tell you about specifically is that if you go to the Common Cause North Carolina website, you can find a good link to some places that are helping out in that area, places specifically in North Carolina and Western North Carolina. So those are Beloved Asheville, Community Foundation of Western North Carolina, Day One Relief, and Hunger and Health Coalition. And overall, I just want to say that I sing the praises of good mutual aid groups. When my wife and I lived in Austin for a few years, we happened to be there when there was that big winter storm that basically shut down the state unexpectedly. And it was a catastrophe. The state was not prepared. The government was not prepared for it. And it was mutual aid groups that we saw in the community, in our own neighborhood and surrounding neighborhoods, really stepping in and getting people going in the right direction towards relief until the, so to speak, big guns could get there. Because sometimes like those bigger organizations or even the federal government or any of those groups that have bigger infrastructure, it takes longer for them to kind of get mobilized and get to where they need to be. In the meantime, I think mutual aid groups are great for filling a gap at the very least. And like I said, we saw them on the ground doing such good work in Austin. And some of those groups that I listed from North Carolina are mutual aid groups. So I think that they're well worth you looking into and perhaps giving to if you feel comfortable. And I do think it's important to kind of do a little bit of research if you can and try to find out, is this a legit organization? Do they have a history on the ground? Do people have good things to say about them? And it's worth your time to just do that little bit of research, probably just to make sure, because unfortunately, a lot of people take advantage of these situations and they take money that doesn't really get put where it needs to be. But if you trust something like Common Cause, which is a national organization and has a North Carolina chapter, they are suggesting those places I mentioned before. And I will link to that page on Common Cause's website so that you could find those if you're interested in helping people in North Carolina. So I hope you will do that. Thank you for listening to Stereoactive Presents. The music in this episode is composed by Hansdale Sue and Maya McDonald. My name is Jeremiah Lee McVeigh. If you like what you hear in the show, please rate and review it in Good Pods, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or anywhere else that allows that. Doing so helps us to expand our audience and is much appreciated. And please follow us wherever you happen to listen to podcasts. Every little bit helps and is truly appreciated again. You can also get in touch with us at stereoactivemedia@gmail.com, and you can find more information about this show and everything else that Stereoactive Media is involved with at stereoactivemedia.com. Now, let's end the episode with one of those tracks from that Landlady studio session I was talking about earlier. This song is called Fine.
Fine. I'll be fine. I'll be fine.
This podcast is produced by Stereoactive Media.